You're listening to another episode of Cloud and Clear, SADA's Cloud Transformation Podcast. I'm your host, John Veltri, and today we're pleased to welcome Abhishek Agarwal, co-founder and CEO of Material Security, to the show. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel on your listening platform and stay tuned and up to date on the latest Cloud and Clear episodes from SADA. Abhishek, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Abhishek, you have a pretty interesting background and you're one of the co-founders of Material Security. Can you give us a 10,000-foot overview of what Material Security is and what inspired you to start the company?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Material Security is basically a security platform that focuses on Google Workspace. So, we started off in email security. Now we do a bunch of other things to help you secure Google Workspace overall. The way we started is actually very topical because it was one of the last election cycles, so actually two election cycles ago in 2016. We were a bunch of folks all at Dropbox. We saw some of the high-profile email attacks that went down in that election cycle, realized some techniques that could have, helped in that situation, and that's what led to the company. So we can talk a lot more about that obviously later on, but that's what led to the creation of the company.
So email security, content sharing, that's the main problem. It boiled down in a nutshell that Material Security solves specifically for Google customers.
Yeah, that's right. So, one of the things that we talk about a lot is if you think about Google Workspace, it's this app that obviously every single person in a company uses. It's the first app you get when you join. It's the last app that's taken away when you leave. So it's really in the security context, this critical piece of infrastructure. We like to say it's not another piece of SaaS. It's this very, very important piece of SaaS. And as a result, from a security perspective, it kind of requires dedicated focus, right? So what you often see is that organizations are patching together a bunch of different tools to help secure this. We think that it really deserves a security platform the same way that other pieces of critical infrastructure in an organization have dedicated security platforms to supplement the native controls that might come with Google itself. And so on the email front, that means things like blocking malicious emails that might be getting through. It also means taking care of the actual content inside mailboxes, which was obviously what happened in the 2016 election cycle. There were email accounts that got compromised. They have years and years of data inside them because we all hoard email, and that becomes a huge target from a security perspective. Google Drive, very similarly, it's very effective for sharing. Obviously, it's what's designed to do, but managing that corpus of data becomes hard for organizations. Configuration of Google Workspace in general, from a security perspective, there's lots of little knobs that can be turned in one way or the other, and organizations sometimes struggle to get a sense of the right baseline configuration. So all of these different problems, they have basically security implications, and that's what Material tries to help with.
Yeah, I think, quick plug to any sort of political party that's looking to protect their data over the next 6 months. Feel free to call Material Security and SADA will help you solve your problem. Hopefully there isn't one. But yeah, I think, if I think about myself, if I think about the company, I think about my family, we're heavily vested in the Google ecosystem, whether it's at SADA on a personal level. And yeah, everybody shares personal information or stores personal information to a significant extent, basically up to the amount of memory that they will allot you, right? Uh, whether it's email, it's photos, it's personal information being stored in something like a Google Drive. I think there's a lot of people who inadvertently create security risks and don't even realize it, whether it's sharing or storing, etc. So, can you dig a little deeper into that area? Maybe some examples. I know you gave us a pretty pertinent one with the 2016 election cycle, but some of the more deeper examples around how Material looks at what are those key threats and how those key threats can be mitigated and prevent those malicious attacks.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can talk about email for a second because one of the things that was pretty unique about when we started the company was when we think about email security, if I just say that phrase, most people think about phishing attacks, BEC attacks, basically malicious emails that are trying to get a user to click on something or do something. Very, very common, still a incredibly popular threat vector. And so a lot of focus in security is on email security from that perspective. And it matters a lot. And, a ton of on a day-to-day basis, we across our customers see a ton of very sophisticated attacks that are difficult for some of the built-in controls to catch, and Material is able to build something that's very organization specific to address those. But the thing that we realized when we started the company is that email is not just a great way to deliver an attack. It's actually a target in of itself, because what happened when organizations moved their email to the cloud is that all of a sudden, like you said, they got all this memory, all this space that previously wasn't really available. And now, as a result, there was no real incentive to delete anything. You just like archive everything, and chances are you might need it in the future. So why not hold on to it? But what that means in an organizational context is now if I go into a mailbox or even in a personal context, there's just years and years and years of email that has collected and it's just sitting there in the archive. And the only security control that it has on it is authentication. So if I can log into an email account, I can basically access all of this data. In terms of specific things that we see in organizations, for example, obviously most companies these days roll out MFA. It's kind of a well understood good practice to have. But even with MFA, there's a bunch of different ways that attackers are able to get into mailboxes. So, for example, they might have malicious OAuth applications that convince the user to give access to the email account. There might be bad browser extensions. There might be malware on a personal device, and that personal device is being used to access the email. So essentially, there could be all these different ways in which a bad guy gets access to an email account. What we realized when we started the company is that doesn't have to be a disastrous event. What we can do is have additional controls on some of the juiciest contents inside of it. So to get very, very specific, imagine that in your email, maybe there's a message that's years old and it's got really sensitive data. What you can do with Material is actually redact it in place and force the user to do an additional challenge before they can access that message. If they pass that challenge, it's restored in their email as usual. But if they don't, then someone could be inside a mailbox but not access the really juicy content. Another very specific example, before this company, I was an early PM at Dropbox. One of the key ways we would see Dropbox accounts get hacked is an email account would get hacked, and then someone can just reset a password to Dropbox and move laterally from that email account to these other applications. And you can replace Dropbox with Twitter, you can replace it with iCloud, whatever. And that's another risk that is related to email security, but not really part of traditional email security. So in that situation, you can do things like intercept the password reset email and, again, force someone to do a challenge before they can access it. So these kinds of layered controls are what really we specialize in the beginning. And a lot of the real attacks we see on a daily basis have to do with either malicious emails that are bypassing the sort of default controls in Google, or these kind of account takeover scenarios, which can lead to a lot of data loss.
Yeah, it's Google does a pretty good job, but this is like a who watches the watcher kind of situation, right? It's the logic you're putting in between whoever's setting the security parameters. Not to say that they're doing it in a malicious way, but giving that extra layer of protection beyond what the native platform affords you.
Yeah, absolutely. Google does do a great job. If you think about just the volume of malicious email or spam that's never even making it to mailboxes, thanks to Google's controls, it's huge. But unfortunately, no detection platform, even Google's, is going to be perfect. And there's always value to additional layers of security. Another kind of big area that we hear from our Google Workspace customers all the time is around Google Drive, because that is just this treasure trove of sensitive content inside an organization. Obviously, I mean, it's where all of the organization's content lives, and it is designed for sharing. So what very quickly happens is you have basically excessive sharing permissions on maybe very sensitive files, and reconciling that becomes a huge challenge for security teams. One of the most kind of popular sort of negative incidents that happens in security in the cloud side is someone left open a bucket with sensitive data on the internet. And it's always this kind of like facepalm moment, right? Of like, oh my God, how could they leave this like cloud bucket full of this data just open to anyone on the internet? Well, a Google Doc that is sensitive with anyone with the link permissions is not really any different, right? And but ironically, like I think most organizations would have many, many instances of sensitive documents that have excessive sharing permissions that they aren't even aware of. And it's very, very hard for any one team to sit around and clean that up. It's just not going to happen at scale. So what you really need in those kinds of situations is something that's going to detect this content, understand if the permissions are excessive, maybe even revoke access after some amount of time and automate that whole process, hopefully with the users involved in the workflows. So again, that's the kind of thing Material helps with.
Awesome. Yeah. So talking about kind of transitioning a little bit, but talking about things like Google Drive, content storage, talking about automation in 2024, you can't help but you cannot avoid the topic of generative AI and the next iteration of automation, right? It's just something
Yeah.
that is in every conversation, it's everywhere you look. With the rapid development that's coming from Gen AI, whether it's a larger ecosystem together or specifically to Google and Google Workspace with Gemini, how is this helping or harming things like email configurations, email usage, sensitive data? And is there a way in which Material is looking to possibly address that, or does the platform already address those areas? What does that mean for you all and in this specific market?
Yeah, absolutely. If you talk to anybody in security about Gen AI, they will always say that there's kind of like two sides of the coin, right? There's the defensive side and the offensive side, just like you said. So, and it's what that means really is that it's a technology that can be used to address a lot of security risks, and it's also a technology that might create or exacerbate certain security risks. So we're already at Material leveraging some of the LLMs and kind of developments around Gen AI for a lot of our existing feature set and capabilities just to enhance them, increase the intelligence. A very simple example is in the classification problem of both suspicious email and also sensitive documents or emails. So classification is a task that can be dramatically improved by using this technology. On the risk side, though, I think one of the biggest ways in which this really exacerbates some of the security risks that we're worried about is if you think about something like Gemini. Well, one of the biggest use cases is that it really unlocks the knowledge that's within an organization. Really, like if I have hundreds and thousands of documents inside my company, it's very hard for me to retrieve information from them. Search is hard, and so one of the promises of something like Gemini is that I can simply ask questions and retrieve information that way. Now, the problem with that is how should Gemini know what I have access to and what I don't have access to? It has to use something as a source of truth, and that something is the permission set on documents. So if I've said that a document has anyone with the link permissions, then the implication is that, well, anyone should be able to access this content or retrieve things from. If I say anyone in the organization, or if I put something in a shared drive, all of a sudden, what Gemini is going to infer from that is that, hey, well, if this permission set is accurate, then user Joe over here should be able to access this content. Now, in practice, that's not always what someone intends when they're setting these permissions. And so with something like Gemini, it's not necessarily helping you set the right permissions. It's using the existing permission set as a source of truth and then amplifying that, right? Helping people actually gain access to that content or find it in search. So it really puts focus on the problem of healing your permission set in the first place. It really increases the urgency because today you could say, well, I don't even know that that file exists. So is it really a big deal that it has anyone with the link permissions? How am I even going to know about it? Well, but now with Gemini, I could literally go to a prompt box, type in questions, and see what comes back. And I might be inadvertently uncovering excessive permissions. So one of the things Material does is for Google Drive in particular, we can go look through all of the shared drives and my drives in a company, classify sensitive content. So understand what sensitive content exists in which documents, and then going one step further, we can automate remediation of permissions on those documents. So, very simply, you could say something like, hey, if a document is 6 months old, has not been accessed for a while, has sensitive content, and it happens to have anyone with the link permissions, maybe we can revoke those and set it back to just the owner so that, we're not just leaving these open uh, buckets per se to the internet. So that's just one kind of example, but you can build these sort of automated remediation flows that are addressing these combinations of sensitive content and accessibility.
Yeah, looking at it, how on again on a personal level, or how I see the people within my organization or our customers engaging with Gemini, asking it to create inferences from one document or two documents, comparing them or drawing inferences across multiple documents into a new document. Yeah, the permission sharing and the rights that are associated with one versus the others don't marry, you could find yourself in a position where you do have these security challenges based on who has permissions and who doesn't. And if you can solve for that, that's a huge way in which it gives chief security officers and other people within the customer's IT set to have some level of confidence that the way in which their employees are going to start using this new technology is still protected and under the governance that they need.
Yeah, and I think the challenge with these technologies is a lot of the built-in controls are just not specific to any one organization. By definition, Google
Oh,
has
build for millions,
hundreds of
right?
millions of customers. Yeah, exactly. So where things become challenging is when you're trying to do anything that's very specific. Maybe you need specific policies. Maybe your organization handles very regulated data. Maybe it has a distributed workforce that needs different policies for different subsets of users. That's where some of the built-in controls can start becoming limiting. And something like Material can help plug the gap.
Yeah. So, I mean, we kind of skipped over this in the beginning. We jumped right into the problem set and how to solve the problem. But switching gears or taking a step back, what made you and your team at Material decide you wanted to start working with SADA and even more in a more large level Google Cloud? And how has that benefited you and your customers?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'll start with Google Cloud. We, from day one of founding the company, have been built on Google Cloud. We have a very unique model with our customers where, because of the nature of access we have to their Google Workspace, we give each customer a single tenant environment that's hosted in Google Cloud. So each one of our customers has a completely isolated private piece of infrastructure that runs Material. If they choose, they can even run it themselves. Uh, Having that kind of setup from an infrastructure perspective, first and foremost required having a lot of programmability around our infrastructure. So GCP has always been really great at being able to automate the provisioning of infrastructure, being able to automate a lot of how it scales up. So that was one big reason. The other big reason is, frankly, BigQuery. Our application consumes a lot of data. It aggregates a lot of data, queries it, and BigQuery is in a class of its own when it comes to data warehouses. And so that was a big driver for the decision as well. As far as SADA goes, there's kind of really two big reasons. The first is that just the position SADA has in the Google ecosystem, with uh, just having a ton of customers, being kind of a premier partner over and over and over again, having a very favorable kind of services offering. The sort of reputation was very, very positive. The other thing though is, from our perspective, we asked our customers. We have a lot of customers on Google Workspace, obviously, and we asked them, who do you work with? And the sort of overwhelming answer was SADA. So it was obvious when we were looking for a partner to work with and do a lot of collaboration that was the way to go.
Awesome. It's appreciated as well, right, from us in terms of nice things being said. So before we close out this podcast, this interview, and we go our separate ways, is there anything related to future insights of the company, what you might be able to discuss from a pipeline standpoint around product releases, future insights, any sort of information outside of what we've already discussed that you would want to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of goes back to that original point I was making about Google Workspace as this critical piece of infrastructure. And our vision is that because it's this critical piece of infrastructure, it really requires a focused security platform. Today, if you think about the average organization and all the different tools that they use to secure Google Workspace, you might have an email security tool that's totally different from a DLP tool, which itself might be different from a SSPM or posture management tool, and so on and so forth. We think that there's a lot of inefficiency there. There's a lot of different tools that people are having to awkwardly stitch together to supplement Google's own security controls. And really, the idea behind Material is that in the same way that there are security platforms that help you with other pieces of critical infrastructure, be it your endpoints or your network or your cloud workloads, we think that there should be an analog for your Google Workspace, which is this like app that every user is touching in the organization. So when it comes to roadmap, what you're going to see for Material is just more and more capabilities to holistically think about Google Workspace. We got our start in email security, and that's where we're very, very strong. But we recently launched capabilities on Google Drive, as I mentioned, and over time we're going to be releasing more that helps you identify risks around baseline misconfiguration, user behavior. So things like if someone has set up an auto forward out of your organization of all their email, or if you've got Google groups that don't have the right moderation settings, things that just really should be easy questions to answer, but are sometimes hard in organizations at scale. That's a lot of what we're working on, and specifically trying to build a single platform where you can kind of combine email security, data protection, and posture management into one place.
Nice. A lot. It's great. Okay, that's it for our questions and our thoughts on how Material is helping our customers. Thank you so much today joining us, Abhishek. Anything you want to leave the audience with?
No, I appreciate it. It was really fun chatting with you. Thank you.
How about this? Can we share Material's website URL?
Yeah, of course. Material.security.
Perfect. And thank you everybody for taking the time to listen to our podcast. You won't want to miss any exclusive insights from leaders like Abhishek. And next time we will see you on Cloud and Clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Cloud and Clear. Check the show notes for links to this week's topics. And don't forget to connect with us on Twitter @Cloud and Clear and our website, sada.com.